overdue, but it took a lot of time because the procedure is cumbersome. It's not so easy. We are talking about a law that has existed since 1960. So you cannot expect that within a week or two, they will just go and repeal it.
So the debate is whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So there are those who think that it's a human rights issue, and no matter what someone has done, a life sentence really would do the trick of serving as a deterrent. Others think that it makes people feel that some crimes are a bit lighter, such as murder and armed robbery or other aggravated offenses. Where do you fall in this debate?
This is a difficult question. Yes, you know, for any situation that you have to consider both the advantages and disadvantages. And when you have done so, then you weigh both. And then you can decide which one outweighs the other. When you come to that conclusion, then you can make an informed decision whether to support the one that outweighs or the one that is less. I will not give a yes answer or a no answer. I'm looking at it from both advantages and disadvantages. You see, society is dynamic. So as we grow and as we progress, what we valued yesterday may not be valuable to us today. So the death penalty was for some years past thought to be an answer to reducing certain serious offenses, one of which is murder, one of which is genocide, one of which is piracy. We are talking about such serious offenses. Now, for those offenses in the past, people thought that the biblical verses, which goes that an eye for an eye, could be used to support the law. And that was why at that time, which was I'm talking about yesterday, people thought that if you use the system of death penalty, we could lessen the commission of such serious offenses. But what do we see today? It is not the case today, because we know that the death penalty has existed since the time of Adam. Now, the question to ask yourself is whether, in spite of the existence of the law on death penalty, the question to ask is whether it has successfully reduced the crime of murder, the crime of genocide, the crime of piracy. The answer is no. Someone even cited the example of countries like Croatia, Finland, where they are considered to be the most peaceful countries in the world. They don't have the death penalty. You don't find crimes like murder happening there. If you compare that to the U.S. state of Texas, for instance, and Florida, where the death penalty is being in their books for quite some time, every now and then we hear that there has been killings all over the place. So it depends on where the angle you are coming from. I'm not advocating for us to maintain the death penalty in our books for now, because society has changed. If you maintain it and you exact the penalty of death on a convicted person, what you have successfully done, or you have succeeded in doing, is to deprive two persons of life. In the first place, he has killed. So we have one person, a human being is dead. then you kill another human being. I don't think that is an answer.
Right. Here's someone who also thinks along those lines. Country Director for Amnesty International Ghana, Madame Genevieve Partington, joining us on our Zoom platform. Genevieve, thank you for making the time and welcome to GTV Breakfast. It must be exciting times for you at Amnesty International, considering how much advocacy you've put into getting this particular law out of our books. What's the feeling like for you right now?
Thank you so much for having me on your program. And at Amnesty International in general, we're just really happy that, this is a win for human rights today, but it's also a fight that we've been on for the past 35 years in Ghana in particular. So it's really great and refreshing to hear that Parliament has finally voted to abolish the death penalty. Again, they only voted on the Criminal Offences Act. There's the Armed Forces Act to be voted on, but I'm confident that the vote will also go positively so that the death penalty is abolished to some extent. And just as your guest said, it's going to abolish about 96% of the death penalty.
I think we may have some challenges with the signal there, but Amnesty International is sharing thoughts on the abolishment of the death penalty from our law books. Genevieve Partington is the country director for Amnesty International Ghana. Genevieve, can you hear us better now?
Yes, I can hear you clear.
Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. You were making the point about the Armed Forces Act also being yet to be worked on, and I think that's where we lost you.
Yes, so Parliament is yet to vote on the Armed Forces Act, and I believe they will definitely vote in favor of the amendment of that act as well. People keep saying death penalty serves as a deterrent to crime. It does not. It never has. There are no statistics that show that death penalty serves as a deterrent. And if you look at what is going on in Burkina Faso right now, can you imagine if they still had the death penalty in their books? The regime would have probably sentenced and executed persons over there. So I think our continent is quite volatile. I don't think we should think Ghana is extremely peaceful and far away from trouble. So the best we can do for this country is to take this out of our statute books and, move forward with the rest of the world that is also abolishing the death penalty. We'll take Myanmar as an example as well. Myanmar still has the death penalty, but they weren't sentencing people for almost more than 40 years. They weren't executing anyone. And I think just a month or two ago, or is it last year, they sentenced someone to death and executed the person. So this is something that if we don't take out of our statute books, any president can come and sign the death warrant of any of the prisoners on death row. We also have to understand that those currently on death row, it's a 50-50. Some are wrongfully convicted, some did not get fair trials. Let's understand that the 170 plus people on death row, we can't say 100% sure that all of them had fair trials or the correct convictions. And based on that alone, I don't think anyone needs to be sentenced to death. So for Amnesty International, this is a win today.
Right.
And for the whole world.
Let's understand some of the details a bit more clearly. This decision was not a unanimous one. So not all MPs voted in favor of the act in general. Can we allude then from that not every MP voted in favor of the abolishing of the death penalty from our statute books? And do you think it harms your fight or your activism in any way?
No, it doesn't, because right now the next steps are the president needs to sign it into law, and then he also needs to commute the current death sentences to life imprisonment sentences. I don't think it affects us in any way because there was a general consensus from Parliament which was good enough to abolish the death penalty. I don't think most of the time, even in Parliament, you don't necessarily get everyone voting or agreeing on one thing 100%. So if we had majority agreeing to make these amendments, I think that is in the positive light for Ghana.
What do you think about the suggestions of conditions to be implemented or to be applied in cases of pardons, for example, with some MPs asking for the president to allow pardons only after a 25-year term has been served, with others also suggesting that perhaps there could be the death penalty for certain categories of offences, but not for perhaps the general ones that we all know? What are Amnesty's thoughts on these?
Amnesty International does not support the death penalty in any form. It doesn't matter what crime was committed, whether you murdered someone. We just don't subscribe to the death penalty, period. It doesn't matter the crime. However, I know that the Office of the Chief Justice has sent a memo to Attorney General's office regarding classification of murder charges. So I'm sure they are definitely working on something regarding classification of murder charges, because we have to understand that sometimes even you have those on domestic violence cases, maybe out of self-defense or something of the sort, they killed, they murdered. They are also facing death row. I think these are some of the things we have to look at case by case basis to see that some, yes, may go for life imprisonment and others might go for a term. As you saw in the Equia Dentes case, I don't have the full details of it because it was a group mob action. Those that were sentenced, the two women that were sentenced, got 12 years. I think the lawyer is in the best place to answer this question in terms of the parole and pardons, and how the president gives pardons. So I'll hand that over to Mr. Musa.
Right, Genevieve. So hold on a bit for us then, and we'll put that to you. Apart from the death penalty, which is a key part of what this amendment is bringing to the fore, there's also the non-custodial sentencing bit and the suggestions that pardons, paroles, and community service should be incorporated into more mainstream prison sentencing. What are the dynamics of that happening, considering the case that she just referenced?
Yeah, before I answer, I just wish to add a point that she missed when she talked about the Armed Forces Act, which has not yet been repealed. Now, we have an important constitutional provision which deals with treason. And now that constitutional provision says that any person who seeks to overthrow the constitution or brings about a change, unlawful change, like removing the president by force, parliament by force, commits treason, and on conviction shall suffer death. Now this provision is entrenched. When they say the constitution is entrenched, it's a special provision. You need a special procedure to be able to change it, and that procedure is not easy. The people who are involved, they have to vote on it, not only parliament. So that particular provision is still there. So death penalty has not been done away with entirely. It is still there. So
the lawful condition, and I've heard some of the MPs talking about this on the floor of Parliament, the Bolga NP and others have talked about the provision in Article 72 of the Constitution, and the Majority Leader Osei Mensah Bonsu made a comment about using the back door to get into some kind of constitutional matter. Is that what you're referring to when you talked about what the Constitution says, basically.
Yeah, the Constitution, you see, the Constitution is the highest law of the land. The procedure for amending the Constitution or a constitutional provision is different from amending an ordinary act of Parliament. So my point is that we still have the provision in the Constitution which deals with a death penalty, and which is treason, when you commit treason.
And this law, or the amendment of this law, does not change that constitutional provision?
It doesn't, because when you come into the Constitution, you have to follow the procedure. I think it's chapter 25 of the Constitution. I'm not 100% sure. But that deals with amendments of the Constitution. But amendments of entrenched provisions of the Constitution, like chapter 5, which deals with fundamental human rights of the individual, to amend it, you need a special process. You can't just look out for two-thirds majority of Parliament and all that to amend it. You need to even go to the people referendum to amend it, and it's expensive, it's cumbersome, the procedure is tedious, it's not so simple. So yes, we have chalked some success in seeking to follow civility by removing the death penalty. We still have a long way to go.
So technically, someone could still be sentenced to death in Ghana
is so.
For treason.
That is so.
And so it's the courts that will determine that, and then the president has to sign.
Has to sanction
as
it
the Constitution requirements are now.
Yes, it is the law that when someone has been convicted of the offense of treason, the mandatory provision says that the punishment shall be death.
No second chances.
No second chance.
No life imprisonment.
No life imprisonment, unless at the pleasure of the president he decides not to execute the warrant, which has always been the case.
And it hasn't happened in Ghana since 1993. No executions have taken place.
Yes.
But then it begs the question, so did we have to say, to remove it from the books entirely, if the technicality of it, if the spirit of it would still be in the Constitution, then why did CSOs, organizations like Amnesty and others, dedicate so much time, decades of work, into getting the amendment in the Act, but not for a constitutional amendment?
Well, I think they also talked about the constitutional amendment, but as I said, it is because that process is beyond Parliament. Parliament has a role to play, but the ultimate decision to amend lies with the people of Ghana. You are talking about the cost, the expense, the time, the experts, and the procedure itself. I'm sure with time they will do it, but because it's an entrenched provision, as I said, you cannot just go about amending it the way it is done in Parliament.
So if I may come in,
Genevieve, yes. So you went for the one that you were sure you could win, albeit it took a long time. You finally done it. So the low-hanging fruit.
So let me explain. So at first, when Amnesty was looking into abolishing the death penalty in Ghana, like Musa rightly
I think we've lost her again, and we'll try and establish. Genevieve, are you with us? I think she's back now. Hello, Jenny.
Oh, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, sorry about that. So like Musa rightly said, it is extremely difficult and tedious to amend the Constitution of Ghana. So what Amnesty did was we to do a research. We consulted with a lawyer Martin Pebu, and he came up with a very creative and strategic approach, which was to amend the Criminal Offences Act and the Armed Forces Act. This is something that was done similar in Sierra Leone to also get the death penalty out of their statute books. So this was something that lawyer Martin Pebu brought up. And through that, Amnesty did a lot of consultations with other lawyers and experts in the field. And then we got lawyer Sosu, who was on board, that decided to pass it through a private member's bill. And this is how we got here today. I think if we hadn't passed through that route, it would have been extremely difficult to have gotten results today. So this was something that was researched on, and we realized that this was the best strategic approach to get the death sentence out of our books for at least 96% of death penalties. So Musa is completely right. High treason is still there. However, because of the approach we used, we managed to get it off for ordinary crimes. So currently in Ghana, with what Parliament voted on, now there's no death penalty for ordinary crimes, and now it is changed to life imprisonment.
What's your reaction to the resistance, at least by certain people or from certain quarters, who thought that it should remain on our statute books? Because again, the deterrent factor. Now that you've managed to get this through, how do you intend to win those people over to your side?
I think in society, not everybody is going to agree with you, and I'm very okay with that. And I think other people should be okay with that. If majority of people understand, I believe that is good enough. There's going to have to be a lot of education and public awareness raising regarding that. And again, I keep repeating to media houses, it does not serve as a deterrent to crime. There are absolutely no statistics on this. So we need to maybe stop saying that. For example, people think it's a deterrent. It's not. It's the same way you have mob action and persons try and take justice into their own hands. That's a completely separate issue that we have in society as well. So I'm quite happy with the results, and I know that right now we just need to do a lot of public education for people to understand that death penalty is not the way. We always use this argument, an eye for an eye. That's in the Old Testament, and we have to also understand that as a people, let's put religion aside, we need to be more human, more empathetic, but also understand that death should not equal another death. I think that contradicts our societal norms, and we need to look more into better punitive measures, but which are not final. Death is final, and what if someone somewhere made a mistake? What if the person was wrongfully convicted? I believe we need to understand these issues. Also, those currently on death row, we all know that they have zero access to recreational facilities in the prisons, and they are completely isolated. So this is something Ghana prisons will also have to look at, how to reintegrate those on death row back into the main prison system.
Interesting point you've raised here, but because we're talking about the other side of the argument, I'll put it to you, Ahmed. When we talked about the advantages of the repeal of the death penalty, you also mentioned the disadvantages.
Yes.
And both you and Genevieve have said we should not use a deterrent as one of those factors because it has proven that it does not work in states like Texas and Florida that you've mentioned. So what could possibly be the disadvantages then? Since you both appear to side with the advantageous side of the repeal, what are the disadvantages of repealing the death penalty?
One of the best disadvantages, if you like, that you can think of immediately is that it will tend to encourage mob action. Lynching will be the order of the day in some cases. You see, you said the society we live in Ghana is divided as far as this issue is concerned. some people still believe that the death penalty should be maintained. Now, here is a case where the death penalty was there. People believe that when you commit murder, your punishment is to suffer death. So, let's say you are arrested for murder by a mob. Because they know that the punishment will be death, they will readily send you to the police station. But where they find that the person has, let's say, murdered an important person in their society, they value the person and he's been murdered. You see, you have a situation where if you are not careful, when they arrest him, instead of taking him to the police, they will say that, look, we cannot allow this man to live.
But that's taking the law into your own hands.
Well, we cannot run away from mob action. It happens, especially here. I have seen many instances where a thief is arrested. Instead of taking him to the police, they beat him to pulp. They do it all the time. So when you think about advantages, you think about the disadvantages. So it's one of the disadvantages that I'm talking about, that it will encourage lynching, for instance.
If people already do not have a trust in the criminal justice system, because I stand to be corrected, that is what a mob action would suggest to me, that you don't trust the criminal justice system to go its full course. Will the presence or absence of the death penalty mean anything to such a person? Because they already do not follow the law, whether there is a death penalty or not.
When people do not follow the law, it's a different thing altogether. But I'm talking about a system where the law works to some extent, but you still have some deviants who believe that whether the law works or not, we can take the law into our own hands. And Ghana is a clear case. The law is working all right, but we still have people in the street who are lynching criminals for stealing money from people's pockets, pickpockets. They kill them. We had a situation where rumors were going around flying that when some people touch your body, you lose your body parts, and it led to so many deaths, mob action.
And the presence of the death penalty did not stop it. So now that it's not there, you think it will make it worse?
You see, the mob action per se, when the commission of an offense is by a mob, it's difficult to establish who landed the last blow which caused the death. And you know, when you are talking about murder, you are looking at the act and the intention. The person who landed the last blow that killed the person. So when it talks about it comes to mob action,
it's difficult.
It's difficult to establish
and to prosecute. We are finding cases in court now.
Yes.
Major Mohammed's
issue,
the trial is a case in point.
Yes, it's a difficult case.
But I want to ask, when we talk about the difficulties, we've talked about the disadvantages. You're saying that lynching and mob actions may increase. Is that all we are likely to see with the repeal?
Well, because you see, it can also divide the society. We have religious fanatics who believe that the death penalty must still be maintained. And sometimes when you listen to the conversation, you see that people get very emotional about it. And sometimes, you know, it could lead to serious misunderstanding. So this particular subject that we are dealing with, I think the lady talked about promoting education to educate people so that they agree. If we don't do that, we're going to have a situation where two rival camps exist in respect of death penalty, and that is not good for us. We need unity.
So I'll put this next one to Genevieve then, because we are talking about education. Genevieve, how do you educate someone whose loved one has been taken away from them and who until now potentially face the death penalty. And we know of families that feel a justification that because their loved one has been taken away from them, that person also needs to go. In this education drive, how do we begin to have those conversations? Where do we begin to tell people that it's not okay for the person who killed their loved one to be killed?
I think the first thing we can think of is helping people understand, yes, exactly, that you can't, it's not a life for a life that we need to do as a society. But what we need to think more of is a punishment that is good enough, which would be life imprisonment. That's one. Two, there was a research that was done within the prison system looking at families of victims. And funny enough, majority of them do not want a death sentence or death execution carried out. What they want is a life imprisonment. Some of them want the perpetrators to live with regret and bad memories of what they've done. So a lot of them actually are not for the death penalty. It's a quick way out. That's how they see it for the perpetrators. And if you even go to the States, a lot of persons on death row are committing suicide because of the nightmares and the psychological issues they get after committing such a crime. They want to end their lives. So according to them, it's almost like we're doing them a favor by sentencing and executing them to death. So I believe that most of them actually are quite happy for the perpetrators to be on life imprisonment. And like Musa Ahmed said, we have to do a lot of public education and help people understand that sometimes people are wrongfully convicted, especially in the case in Ghana, where most of the persons on death row are vulnerable people and are people from very poor backgrounds, which have very little understanding of the law and probably didn't get fair trials. I'm not saying that for all the cases, but just a few. So even the fact that it's 1% or 2% of these people that may have been wrongfully convicted or didn't have fair trials, just for that fact alone, there shouldn't be the death penalty in any system in this world.
I'll bring up the issue of pardons and non-custodial sentencing again with you, Musa, but I want to find out, Genevieve, you talked about ensuring the prison system, ensuring that they put systems in place to reintegrate condemned cells inmates, as we call them in Ghana, death row inmates, back into the wider prison society. What would that entail?
Well, I'm sure they would have to look into it in terms of giving them access to recreational facilities, also making sure they are healthy, because again, these people are usually isolated. They would have to do probably a lot of therapy, psychological interventions to make sure they are also, okay to get back within the main prison system. So, and then also, mind you, these people don't have access to education, to nothing, to even reading. They have access to nothing. So these kind of things, it's going to be a step-by-step approach, I'm sure, that the Ghana Prison Service will be looking at. I know UNODC is working a lot in this area, and I know that they are working on a plan towards the reintegration.
What would be your final word before we take leave of you, Genevieve, on this repeal? The president, of course, is yet to append signature to the law, but it's widely expected that that would happen. What are your expectations beyond this point?
I believe my expectations are once the president signs it into law, I'm also hoping, Amnesty International is hoping that those that are currently on death row, their sentences will be commuted to life imprisonment. And we are also hoping that, there'll be more public education on this. Like Mansa Ahmed said, it's not the end for us. We have to look at how to make our society understand and not, move to mob action and move to other means of taking justice into their own hands. So there's going to have to be a lot of public education on this. So I would like to call on all other CSOs. Amnesty International will be doing this. We've always done public education on death penalty, but I'd like to call on other CSOs as well, and the government too, to really push for more public education on death penalty so that people understand that they can't take justice into their own hands, and we need to look more at mob action as well. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Genevieve. Your thoughts have been very, very welcome on this conversation. Country Director, Amnesty International Ghana, what are your thoughts on this matter? Death penalty being scrapped, but technically still in the constitutional provision there. 05555610034 is our number. Share your thoughts. Other inmates do not have. Give us an idea of what that is like. How is the death row inmates different from other prisoners in our prison system?
What they do when you go to in some maximum, security prisons, for instance, they isolate them from the normal prisoners, and they keep them in a confinement that is called condemned cells. That is the name given to it. You are kept far away from the normal, and it is fenced. You are not allowed to even enjoy facilities like playing football, coming to have discussions, coming to even undertake any social activity, so to speak. You are totally isolated. You are kept like a monk, if you like. I don't know the rationale, but I believe that because you are to suffer death, they don't want you to come out and maybe become a danger to others. Probably that is the reason why you are kept in confinement.
Well, the MP who sponsored the private member bill in Parliament, which led to what we have now, an amendment of the Criminal Offences Act, which in effect removed the death penalty from our law books, is on the line. Francis Xavier Sosu is Medina MP, and he joins us with his thoughts. Francis, should I say congratulations, Honourable, because of this feat that you've been able to achieve, and I'm sure you consider it a victory.
Yeah, thank you very much. A very good morning to your cherished viewers. I think congratulations is in the right place, but no congratulations to me. Congratulations to Ghana, and congratulations to the Parliament of Ghana, and congratulations to all human rights activists, Amnesty International Ghana, SHRAJ, CDD, all the coalition who have worked so hard behind the scenes to ensure that this become a success. I think everyone deserves commendation. We need to commend the former president, may he so rest in peace, His Excellency Atta Mills, who began the Constitutional Review Commission, Constitutional Review that led to a recommendation that the death penalty be replaced with life sentence. We need to congratulate the then Attorney General, Honorable Marita Repeal, and Dr. Yine, who issued a government-wide paper to accept the recommendation to remove the death penalty from our statute book. We need to congratulate the current president, Nana Danko Akufo-Addo, for his support for the bill and actually voting at the UN General Assembly to end the use of death penalty last year. And we need to congratulate every individual, all the stakeholders, the drafters, parliamentary staff, and the clerk to Parliament, Mr. Jetron, and all others, especially the Speaker of Parliament, Majority Leader, Minority Leader, and all those who have worked hard to ensure that this bill becomes a law. I think that all of them deserve commendation. I was just a conveyor belt. Yes, I sponsored the bill. In fact, that is the language of Parliament. If you're a private member that initiates an idea, that is how it's called. The prime member sponsors the bill. But I think the glory goes to everyone, the hidden people, lawyer Martin Bebu, who consulted extensively for the Amnesty International Ghana and first proposed the idea that we could go about abolishing the penalty without necessarily touching the Constitution.
So
I think everyone deserves.
There are a lot of pats on the backs to go round. But now is the difficult part, that even now there are people who resisted the repeal of this aspect of the criminal law of Ghana. How do you intend to bring them on board? And have you listened to the arguments that they've submitted on their opposition to the removal?
I have carefully reviewed those arguments, and my candid opinion is that these are very germane arguments. They are it makes a lot of sense to make the kind of arguments they make, that it would serve as a deterrent, and that it could be a license to people to kill, and so on and so forth. And it makes sense, particularly when you are looking at their arguments from their own perspectives, and sometimes from the perspectives of victims. But the truth is that when we have to develop a major policy shift, you will always have people who will speak for and against. Almost all major bills, even government bills that come to Parliament, there's always sometimes very, very highly spirited debate for and against. But the decision for us to move, I think that was very courageous, because you must have the courage as a leader to move your society where they ought to be, even though some may not want to be there. The truth is that all over the world, when you look at research, a lot of these arguments do not have any legs to stand on, even though they are legitimate, because it borders on people's emotions. For example, the deterrence argument. There are several tons and tons and tons of research material that shows that there is no correlation between the retention of death penalty and prevention of crime. And there has never been any one single empirical evidence in support of the deterrence argument. And Ghana is now part of the 28 African countries that have abolished the penalty for ordinary crimes. And there is no evidence on the continent suggesting that because some people took away the death penalty, violent crime increased. Rather, we have several research that points to the fact that countries that retain death penalty continuously have high rates of murder and high rates of violent crime. And so the deterrence argument, though may be a good argument, really in real substance is not supported by any empirical data. Then the one from the victim's perspective is also a very good argument. But it is exactly the reason why the form of punishment has changed. Punishment historically has always been retributive and very repressive, particularly when your society is very organic. And so if you look at our traditional settings, in fact, even in the past, between 14th century, 15th century, 16th century, people used to, crucifixion of Christ Jesus was a form of punishment. People used to be beheaded as a form of punishment. And those days, those kind of killings were done openly as a means to invoke fear in people, as a way of preventing them from committing similar crimes. But over the years, society has moved from retributive punishment to what they call reformative punishment. Now, the reformative focuses on not only inducing fear in people, but rather, let's see how we can reconcile offenders to the community and the society and teach them a better way of doing things. But now, in terms of the victim, punishment has moved from reformative to what we call restorative. So now we have restorative justice. And this restorative justice is part of all the transitional justice approaches to dealing with crime now. And that is the reason why Ghana last year passed the what we call the Plea Bargaining Act.
Right.
So now we are not only looking at the one who committed offense. If the person admits their offenses, you actually want to look at reparation. Are they able to pay something to the victim? How do they reconcile them together? So we are actually moving, and I think this step is really a very bold step to move away from one particular way of doing things to another. And in the next 30, 40, 50 years, our children will be living in a more civil environment. They will not have to be induced by fear to do right.
Francis, thank you so much for making time to join us this morning. I think we'll have another round table where we can talk about where we go from here with some of the reforms that you're talking about in our justice delivery system. Francis Xavier Sosu is the MP for Medina and also the person who sponsored the amendment of the Criminal Offences Act in Parliament as a private member's bill. Honourable Francis Sasu, thank you so much for making the time. Thank you as well, Mr. Ahmed, for making time to join us this morning, sharing perspectives on this very important issue. Like I offered to the Honourable, perhaps we'll have you back to talk about at length about the reforms that we want to see in our justice delivery system when it comes to the reformation rather than the punitive aspects of integration back into society. Thank you for making the time. Mr. Musa Ahmed is the head of firm Ahmed Legal Consult, and we also had Genevieve Partington, who is the country director, Amnesty International Ghana, joining the conversation. Also, the Honourable MP for the good people of Medina, Francis Xavier Sosu, the sponsor of the private members bill that led to the repeal of this part of the law in our Criminal Offences Act. This has been the segment on GTV Breakfast. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some opportunities for you to study more courses and get a better education with Heritage College after the break.
Le ewa na keke. Ni wana minshe ekun.
Jajale shi onga e bai